Legend of the Two Wolves. An old Cherokee Indian is teaching his grandson about life. A fight is going on inside me, he says to the young boy. It is a terrible fight, and it is between two wolves. One is evil, and he is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, guilt, resentment, lies, superiority, and ego. He continued, the other wolf is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside you and inside every other person as well. So the grandson thinks about this for a minute, and he asks his grandfather, but which wolf will win? The old Cherokee simply smiles and replies, the one that you feed. So DNA, or D-ribonucleic acid, is essentially the building block of life. DNA is made up of 4 chemicals: guanine, cytosine, thymine, and adenine. And they are abbreviated the letters A, T, G, and C. So in a DNA strand, these molecules pair up. So G with C and T with A, and form what are known as base pairs that sort of form that classic DNA structure of a double helix. These chemicals are much like the sort of binary code, the ones and zeros that are on the line of computer code. So they're arranged in the human cell in a similar fashion, so like a CG, T, GT, GACT, etc. And the order in which these chemicals are arranged gives our cells instructions on what to do, how to act, how to react. What's quite amazing is that within the tiny space in every cell in our body, the code, the genetic code, is 3 billion letters long. So if I had to read out that code at a rate of 3 letters per second, it would take me 31 years. What's even more is that 99.9% of our DNA is similar, so similar to everyone else's genetic makeup. And what is unique to each person is the fractional difference in how these 3 billion letters are sequenced or arranged in ourselves. The implication of this is that there's never existed a computer program that wasn't designed. A code, a program, a message given through a language, there's always an intelligence behind it. So this 3 billion letter code instructing a cell what to do, the question is who wrote that script? Who placed this working code inside the cell? One of the scientists and the director working on the Human Genome Project said that it was humbling for him and awe-inspiring to realize that as humans we've caught the first glimpse of our own instruction book, previously known only to God. That was Dr. Francis Collins. So when we look at the DNA structure within the human body, we can't escape the presence of intelligent design. In fact, incredibly intelligent design. According to the Bible, which is in itself incredibly complex, God is the author of our existence. So our DNA is like a blueprint. And through understanding our DNA, we can, in a way, embrace the mystery of God's fierce attention to detail within each one of us. The psalmist, for example, writes, "Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them." God also speaks to Jeremiah and he says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." Is it possible that God is referring to that genetic substance, that code? Is it possible that Eve and Adam, upon eating from the tree of knowledge, opened themselves up to thoughts that modified their very DNA or left them predisposed to all manner of stress and corruption? I think not only had their spiritual beings become corrupted in some way, but perhaps their genetic material as well. And that, together with a creation that has become perverted from the original plan, through the ages, our DNA has perhaps been exposed to environmental factors and stresses in this context that has also modified our genetic information. Kind of like how a virus attacks a cell and modifies it. Following on from this, is it possible that God has encoded us with the information needed to improve our lives, to combat disease, to enhance our well-being? Is this perhaps what Jesus did when he healed? Did he, in fact, restore the natural order of the bodies of those he healed simply by reconfiguring their DNA? So the body and the mind appear to be linked, and quite intimately linked. It turns out that the neurons of your brain are a lot more busy with their DNA than was initially thought. Up to 40% of your neurons apparently contain DNA, with long portions of that DNA deleted or duplicated. And what that means is that the genomes within your neurons have become clipped or modified or copied over your lifetime. What's even more is that this has happened in slightly different ways from neuron to neuron. And altogether, this adds up to thousands of mutations across your sort of brain landscape. Scientists today liken the genetics of the human brain to a mosaic, a collage of different elements that come together as a cohesive piece of art. Now, the old thinking was that our brain is unchangeable, so by the time we reach adulthood, that's it. It can't change. But we now know that the brain is plastic. It can transform, and it is constantly changing, updating and upgrading itself. So we also used to believe that our genes, the genetic information passed down from our ancestors, determines our lives, our health and our success. But it turns out that this may not be entirely true. And the new science of epigenetics is uncovering some of these new discoveries. So through this scientific process, it's revealing that our perceptions and thoughts can actually control our biology. So in other words, our thoughts, our actions and experiences are capable of modifying our genetic information, overriding the DNA data that was handed down to us. And the findings from scientific studies, such as those published by a Canadian group in the journal Cancer, suggests that our mental state actually has a measurable physical influence on us, and more specifically on our DNA. in the study they found with breast cancer patients that were involved with mindfulness meditation were shown to preserve or even enhance telomere length. So the telomeres are the stretches of DNA that cap our chromosomes and help to prevent deterioration in our cells. And biologists often refer to them as the plastic tips on shoelaces, for example, that prevent the shoelaces from sort of deteriorating. So the implication of this is that if you're always thinking negatively, in a way you're programming your cells to behave in a negative way. So negative thoughts stimulate the release of chemicals and hormones that make you feel tired and sick and angry or upset. And negative thinking doesn't just make you feel terrible, it can also limit your ability to learn new concepts and ideas, to form meaningful relationships, and to even think creatively. So when we experience negative emotions like anger, anxiety, hatred, jealousy, or we think negative thoughts, we experience stress, and our energy reserves in our body are redirected to confront that stress and those feelings, instead of being directed towards maintaining and repairing and regenerating healthy cells. So if you've been bombarding your cells with negative thoughts and the peptides associated with that, you could be literally programming your cells to receive more of the same negative thoughts and negative actions in the future. And even worse, you're lessening the number of receptors of positive peptides on the cells, and you're making yourself more inclined towards negativity. So unfortunately, most of the thoughts that you do think are negative, according to various psychologists. It's a survival mechanism that's built into us, and it's not necessarily our fault. But those negative thoughts actually, they take center stage in our minds, enabling us to learn from our mistakes rather than our achievements. So apparently every cell in your body is replaced every 2 months or so. So the implication of this is that in theory you could reprogram your pessimistic cells to be more optimistic by adopting positive thinking practices, for example. So through meditating on God's word, would it be possible that we could renew our minds through a process that filters down to the genetic code in almost every cell in our bodies, so to speak? Paul talks about this in Romans, this process of renewing our minds. And the author of Proverbs 23 verse 7 says, "As someone thinks within himself, so he is." Is it possible that in thinking we are programming our bodies in a certain way? Now, through genetic engineering, we're able to modify the DNA sequence through what's known as gene editing. So scientists liken this to the process of finding and replacing certain features in a Word document, for example, using the find and replace feature. So where there's spelling errors or grammatical errors, you can type in what you want to find and replace it. But instead of fixing words, gene editing actually rewrites our DNA. And researchers have been able to actually target genes to correct harmful mutations, change the activity of specific genes in plants and animals, including humans. So bad code can be removed, and potential here is for curing diseases and taking care of mutations. So there are many ways to edit genes, but the breakthrough behind, I think, the greatest achievements in recent years is a molecular tool that's known as CRISPR-Cas9, which uses a guide molecule, so that's the CRISPR part of it, to find a specific region in an organism's genetic code in the DNA. So for example, a mutated gene, and then it can cut out that that gene using an enzyme known as Cas9. So in this way, the damaged genes can be fixed, the mutated genes removed, and replaced with a new healthy strand. This idea of gene editing and Cas9, has been showcased in the award-winning documentary, actually, known as called Human Nature. Check it out on Netflix if you want to check that out. It's quite a nice introduction to genes and genetic editing. So this might seem like a wonderful idea. I mean, think of the potential in terms of preventing and curing diseases. But are we playing God? What are the ramifications, the repercussions of this? Do we risk losing our individuality? What are the possibilities of creating perfect babies, super soldiers that don't experience pain or fear? The thing is that every change comes with a chance of creating something unintended. And modern gene editing, although it's relatively precise, it's not perfect. And the procedure can be a bit of a hit and miss, reaching some cells and not others. So for some genetic diseases, this doesn't necessarily matter, but if a single mutated gene causes the disorder, that's another issue. Another problem that is quite common happens when you edit genes, but it's made at the wrong place in the genome. And there can be hundreds of these sort of off-target edits that can be dangerous if they disrupt healthy genes or crucial regulatory DNA. Check out the book called A Kraken Creation by Jennifer Doudna. But these are important questions, and I think in an age where we are entering the possibility of refining who we are through genetics, my question is, are we potentially playing God, and are we opening ourselves up to ethical and moral repercussions that are beyond that which we could even imagine?